Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining another API Management Community webcast. Today we're covering the latest release for API Gateway. That's API Gateway 9.3. On the phone we have Aaron Flint. He's a member of the API Gateway product team. He's going to walk you through a presentation on the new release today. If you have any questions as we're going through today's session, you can feel free to enter them into the Q&A box. You can find the Q&A box in the right-hand panel of your WebEx screen. If you don't see it maximized, there is a button at the top right. It's a blue box with a question mark in it. Click that to expand the Q&A box, and then you can start typing your question. If you have a question that you'd rather ask over the phone, that is an option as well. We'll open up the line for verbal questions at the end of the session today. So if you have a question you'd rather ask verbally, you can hold on to that until the end, and I'll let you know how to unmute your line at that point. Okay, I think we can go ahead and get started now. You can take it away, Aaron.
Great, thanks, Melanie, and good morning or good afternoon or good evening to all of you, depending on where you happen to be in the world. My name is Aaron Flint. I'm a product manager with the API Gateway, and as Melanie mentioned, I'm going to be talking today about some of the new features and enhancements that we've done for the 9.3 release. So just a quick overview of what we're going to be talking about today. I'll do a quick overview that highlights some of the areas of focus that we've done for this release, and then I'll dive into some of the details around the operational improvements, enhancements and changes to the developer tools, and performance enhancements that we've done for the release. And then I'm also going to talk about a couple of initiatives that we've done during the release timeframe to be able to enable our customer base to be able to upgrade and continue using kind of newer versions of the gateway going forward. So highlights very quickly. So this is the first main release of the gateway since 9.2, and the 9.3 release does continue on with some of the more important themes that we want to continue to push with the gateway with any new release for the gateway. We've made some operational updates, made it easier to configure and run and maintain the gateway, and I'll talk very specifically about the new container form factor that we've got for the gateway in this release. We've made some changes for the developer user experience, so we're always trying to add additional functionality for both the development of policy and for the ease of development itself, so thinking about the tools that our customer base uses to actually use the product. And then finally, I'm going to talk a little bit about a focus on performance. This is a relatively new, as in the last couple of releases, focus for us where we've tried to make changes to the gateway, not only to increase throughput from a performance point of view, but also looking to make the gateway more resilient and behave better, in some of the complicated network environments that our customers run the gateway in. So start off with the operational improvements. So we have made significant improvements to the container gateway over previous versions, as well as some incremental operational improvements to other existing functionality within the release. So we'll kick it off by talking about the new Docker container. So as many of you know, we've actually had a Docker container version or form factor for the gateway since the 9.2 release. The 9.2 Docker container, it was a good stab for us. It was a good initial try at Docker, but really we did learn a lot from our internal team, but also from customer feedback around what we could do to improve it. So in the 9.3 release, we have introduced a new container, which actually does incorporate a lot of those learnings. It's got a lot of more flexibility. It's a lot easier to manage than previous versions of that particular form factor. So some of the highlights of the features that we've got in here, it does support scriptable deployment using standard container-based orchestration tools, for example, Kubernetes and Swarm. This really allows users to use those industry standard tools to manage the gateway, which in turn allows them to integrate with their existing CI/CD pipeline tools that they may be using today. So by using those industry standard tools, we allow users to seamlessly be able to add the container gateway to their, to their existing processes to be able to make that transition a lot smoother. This particular container gateway is a lot smaller now, so it weighs in at about 550 megabytes versus the normal 2.5 gigabytes for the image, so quite a bit smaller, which in turn makes it a lot more portable, a lot faster to start, and again, a lot faster to redeploy. So again, thinking about the use case for this particular form factor where we want ease of use and simplicity and a high amount of portability, having that smaller form factor does help us quite a bit. We do support the Docker container on both Docker Engine and OpenShift, which will enable customers to be able to run in a variety of environments. And we're thinking about environments not necessarily for those particular environments, but also anywhere that those environments may run as well. So these are paths that are well known and well used within the industry, and whether our customers choose to run on-premise or in the cloud, we want to be able to allow that Docker container to run in those environments wherever you happen to be running that environment. So with that said, the new container does require a little bit of a change in mindset, but it is all in line with a lot of the modern deployment practices that we're seeing a lot of our customers start to pick up and start to deploy. So comparing it to the other appliance form factors that we've got today, things like the installation and upgrade, even things like backup and restore processes, these are all based on a model of deployment or redeployment, as opposed to what you would normally do with an appliance form factor today around, specifically upgrading that static image and making sure that that is up to date. We've also started to rely a lot more on the path itself. So whereby in other appliance form factors, we'll take care of some of the the operations, such as providing a database or providing an area for logging or even monitoring. We're now starting to rely more on the paths to do that for us. So things like Docker and OpenShift and other platform as service products, they all come with those types of tools, and we want to be able to make sure that the container can be used with those tools in this particular form factor. So overall, we have made a lot of important improvements here, and we do want to continue to make changes to this particular form factor as we go forward into the future. We've made some changes to the migration utility that we provide with the gateway, specifically around increasing flexibility for those migration tools. So as many of you know, users of the GMU, you'll know that it relies on a fairly strict system of unique identifiers to manage and migrate entities between environments. But for those of our, for some of our longer-term customers who might have used previous tools, such as the ESM or even the CMT to do that migration, you'll know that you were able to have a lot more flexibility with that migration in terms of being able to migrate by name or by service name rather than relying on a very strict identifier rule set. So in 9.3, we've extended the functionality of GMU and RESTman to incorporate that type of flexibility and allow the migration of services by name, from one environment to the other. So we've actually added two different commands here, one for mapping by path. So this is actually an extension to map by name, which would allow a user to migrate from a source to a destination using the name of a service, and additionally be able to move that service from one location on the source gateway to another location on the destination gateway by name and by path. We've also added an additional extension called map by URI for the specific use case where a customer may have the exact same service name in a particular folder and would not be able to discriminate on which service they were trying to migrate. By adding the URI, we allow an extra level of granularity to be able to migrate that service that might have the same name. So really a lot of benefit here for customers. We want to better support the migration of established or pre-existing environments with the new tools that we develop, and it also allows customers to now continue using those established migration scripts and processes that they use today. And I'll quickly finish off this section with some additional operational improvements we made in Gateway. So of course, the third-party product support matrix, we're always continuing or trying to continue to support the latest versions of the products that the Gateway interfaces with to enable the Gateway to work with those modern environments. In the 9.3 release, we've added support for IBM MQ8 for our JMS and MQ native support. We've also upgraded the Gateway's database, the configuration database to MySQL 5.7, which is now, of course, fully supported. We've also increased our support for PA single sign-on, formerly known as SiteMinder, to support 12.7. And of course, platform updates. We've modernized the AMI to be able to be built differently to take advantage of some of the more modern, kind of modern deployment structures that Amazon has put into place for their images. And with ESXi, we now support virtual hardware 10 and 11, which line up with the versions of ESXi that we do support for the Gateway as well. Okay, moving to some developer tools. So the developer user experience is, of course, an important cornerstone for the gateway, and we're always striving in any release to add functionality that gives our customer base more tools to be able to build policy with. But in this release, we've also done some work around improving the environment that you're actually building that policy within. And we have made quite a few policy manager usability improvements with this release. So the policy manager is still the primary administration tool for the gateway today, and this particular release does introduce a number of usability enhancements. We've added autocomplete for key names for cluster-wide properties and also for SSL cipher suites. So no longer do you need to memorize which of the 180 or 200 cluster properties you want to use. You can just start typing away in the keyboard or on the screen, and it will autocomplete as you continue to type until you narrow it down to the one that you're looking for. We've also added support for keyboard shortcuts using Control, plus, arrow, or letter keys to be able to add or remove assertions from policy, and also to be able to reorder assertions within a policy. So that there's less mouse work. We know that the developer community likes to use their keyboard and loves their keyboard shortcuts to do things. We've also added global settings for the ability to show or hide comments and assertion numbers within policy. So in previous releases, you would have had to do this on a policy-by-policy basis. We've added a global toggle that allows you to do it globally for the entire gateway. So while these improvements do seem minor in themselves, it's important to note that these were actually inspired by two groups that are near and dear to my heart. One, of course, is our customer base. A lot of these enhancements were actually surfaced through our community site as requests for enhancements to the policy manager. And we went through and we looked at them and we took the ones with the highest number of votes and we decided to add them to the release. But it's also important to note that this is actually, that a lot of these features are also being driven by our internal development team. I mean, these guys use the policy manager every single day, and they also have opinions of what would work and what wouldn't work. So all in all, it's really been a very, kind of developer collaborative focus to be able to improve the policy manager and make these changes in the 9.3 release. We've added LDAP write capability to the gateway. So as users know, they can already authenticate and query and LDAP with the gateway. However, today, if an API workflow requires an update to that LDAP, users were forced to use a third-party tool. And we have a lot of common use cases where API workflows may involve the creation of a user in an LDAP, or the update of a password, or some other attribute for that particular user, like a role. And we want to be able to allow users to be able to incorporate that particular workflow into their policy to allow the developers to build a more complete solution with the gateway. So you can see here that the LDAP does now support change type, and the LDAP connector itself would support all of the same LDAP providers that the gateway supports today for authentication, and in fact would use that configuration in the same way, so you don't need to set up kind of multiple configurations for the gateway. We've also added some support for those gateway customers that also happen to use single sign-on, CA single sign-on. We've done some work in conjunction with the SSO team to support the JWT as a credential type for SSO. So while this is available in the 9.3 gateway release, this won't be available until SSO 12.8, which is supposed to be out sometime later this year. But we wanted to get it in there early, so that once that release is out, the gateway just works with it. So the advantage here, of course, is that at JWT, it can be derived from other credential types, which allows us to be able to leverage the breadth of gateway credential support that we've got today. So older gateway releases, they only supported username and password and X509 certificate as credential types. But extending this now to include JSON Web Token, we can do things like pass OAuth tokens or other encrypted tokens that can be converted to or encased within a JWT and then sent back to SSO for authentication. We would also, of course, support the other simpler use case where a JWT is actually passed from a client side through the gateway, and we can simply pass that that JWT onto SSO in its in its native form. So really, this is a good collaborative effort. It allows us to be able to extend to our users the full breadth of the gateway authentication support that we've got today, while also combining with the first-class authentication and authorization support that CAASSO brings to the table as well. I also wanted to highlight some additional functional extensions. So we've made some improvements to the JSON support within the gateway. We've added support for JSON schema v4. So current versions of or previous versions of the gateway, of course, supported just version 2. And with version 4, we've supported, of course, keywords and the v4 validation. We've also added some additional functionality to return error codes via the assertion as a context variable, so that our customers can then use the values of those errors to be able to make kind of further decisions within their policies. We've also improved our JSON path, so we wanted to be able to make it a little more consistent, and the queries that the queries that are done and the result sets that come from those queries, we wanted to have more consistency with what was put in, so that, again, users can have some reliability that that's going to be something that they can use in the policy further down the road. All right, moving to performance. We, of course, want to ensure that the gateway is both fast and reliable, which are very important things for our customer base. So we do continue to make improvements around performance to the gateway to be able to satisfy this need. So one of the big additions that we've made to the 9.3 release is adding support for the circuit breaker pattern. So this is actually something that we added to the micro gateway release that we did back in September of last year. It's a pretty standard pattern for that particular, space. But when looking at it, we felt that there would be additional value here for some of our enterprise gateway customers. So we decided to roll the same functionality into the enterprise gateway. So this is really a construct that allows gateways to fail fast and really not attempt something that it knows is not working. So we know that there are a lot of the networks and a lot of the environments that our customers roll the gateway into can be very complicated. We often run into situations where back-end services can be slow or unresponsive, or they've outright failed. We know that networks can get bogged down. They can be interrupted from their usual high throughput that can have an impact back on the gateway. Additionally, we know that there are policy assertions that can take a long period of time. They could end up slowing down the overall gateway throughput. So we want to be able to provide this ability because of where the gateway tends to sit in customers' environments, right in the middle of things. It tends to be affected by a lot of these things, and we wanted to be able to provide this construct to allow our customer base to create policy that's a little more resilient. And here, kind of down in the bottom, you can see these two graphs. On the left-hand side, this is kind of, the typical performance for a system that has increased latency because it's trying to do something that's failing. It might be trying to hit a back-end server that's down or slow or otherwise, kind of bogged down, and it keeps waiting for responses. And that gateway will continue to keep trying it. So you can see here that the times that it's taking are consistently high because it's just trying the same thing. On the right-hand side, this is a system that uses a circuit break, and you can see here it has a few times where it's tried that thing that doesn't work, but once that circuit is tripped, it stops trying, and the latency will then drop right back down, and it continues to go along. So in the case on the right, it has identified the fact that there's something slow. It's used the circuit breaker logic to trip itself and stop trying that thing, and it continues on down the road of kind of behaving correctly. So the circuit breaker assertion is introduced in 9.3 as a composite assertion, so similar to similar to the one or more or the all or the concurrent all. It allows users to set thresholds, specifically around latency and failures on blocks of policy, and then allow them to set recovery periods that would suspend the execution of a block of policy if something goes wrong. So our customers will be allowed to be able to trip a policy block based on latency. For example, if something takes more than a certain number of milliseconds to complete, it would allow that gateway to effectively back off while whatever slow system is causing that latency to occur either recovers or is looked at or addressed in some other way. We can also trip based on actual policy failure, for example, the number of failures within a policy or the number of failures within an assertion within that composite block, which then would give administrators a heads up something's not working right, and they can go into the policy and be able to troubleshoot and diagnose. So really when we talk about circuit breaker, we're looking for a real customer benefit here around providing a better user experience and overall reliability for the gateway. We want to be able to also protect the health of back-end services and APIs that the gateway is trying to interact with and consume. as well as provide more visibility into bottlenecks in policy or the environment for our customer base. As well, I'll highlight some other improved performance enhancements that we've done for existing systems. So, of course, we continue to improve the overall performance for the gateway within some of the other things that we've got there in order to remove bottlenecks and improve traffic flow. In the 9.3 release, we've made some enhancements to syslog to be able to have a much better performance for syslog and eliminate bottlenecks. We've greatly increased the performance for MQ native and JMS across all providers around throughput. We've also made some OS level changes to improve the overall performance. We're always striving to make sure that the appliance is up to date and that the operating system is really tuned for some of the more modern environments that we find the gateway running in. Okay, well, now that I've talked about some of the really good things and enhancements and new features that we've added to 9.3, I'm going to talk about some of the things we've done during the time frame to be able to encourage users to get up to that latest version and continue to stay there. So the first thing we've done is an accelerated upgrade process. So we understand that upgrade can be difficult, it can be time consuming, but we really do want to get our customers to that latest version of the release. To that end, we've provided an alternate upgrade process really designed to be simpler and take less time than the existing one. So what we tried to do is actually bypass the usual upgrade process and drill it down into 4 quite simple steps, whereby you can see in this particular diagram, I've got a pre-9.3 gateway and a 9.3 gateway. In this model, you would start up that 9.3 environment. You would keep the old one running, though, while you went and configured the new one. And then it would just be simply a matter of copying data from that older gateway to 9.3, using the existing tools in the 9.3 gateway to upgrade the data to the correct schema. And then once that 9.3 gateway is up and running, you'd be able to shut down the old environment and then start running with 9.3 seamlessly. So the advantages to this method, it's much faster than the traditional method, and really that time improvement is actually amplified quite a bit as that pre-9.3 gateway gets older. So moving from 9.2 to 9.3, because the jump is fairly small, you might not see that much of an improvement from the old method. But if you happen to be a customer coming from 8.0 or 8.1, you know what that release process is going to look like. This particular process will be quite a bit faster than what we currently recommend today. It also allows a path for the upgrade without a significant downtime. Because you're leaving that existing environment running, your maintenance window for actually doing the upgrade could be quite a bit smaller. It's certainly not zero downtime yet, but it's pretty close and certainly quite a bit less than what our customer base would normally experience today. And this can be applied to, as I said, any version pre-9.3 getting up to the 9.3 gateway would support this particular model. The other thing we've done is more of a process change as opposed to a functional change, but we've been striving to deliver smaller fixes to customers at a faster cadence. So here in this diagram, again, I've got a normal upgrade path which introduces a lot of changes at once typically. So if you're going from, say, in this case, I'm going from 9.3 to the next version, to Gateway Next, that upgrade would normally carry with it all of the features, all the enhancements, all the bug fixes, any architectural changes, any changes we've made to the operating system. All of those things would come in one big, in one big update. We know that our customers have been generally resistive to this type of model because some of our releases are long. There's a potentially large scope of change. So when you're going from, for example, 8.0 to 9.3 or even 8.4 to 9.3, we know that the change set is tremendous, and there's a lot of things there to be able to upgrade to and incorporate within your environment. We also know that sometimes we make changes in default behavior and there are regressions within the product. We know that this is a bad customer experience and we want to be able to minimize those as much as possible and take that fear away from our customers in terms of being able to move to that next version. So with that in mind, we've actually started a more frequent cumulative release process. So this is designed, again, to release smaller fixes faster through a series of cumulative releases. So you can see here that in 9.3, we would, instead of waiting until everything was ready in Gateway Next, we'll start releasing cumulative releases, which would include, things like bugs or enhancements to the gateway, small enhancements, while leaving those larger fixes for later. So really, there's a lot of benefits here. The CRs would be released on a regular interval. So that's CR1, CR2, CR3. We would announce those in advance as to when we're going to release those things, but they will be shorter, quite a bit shorter. And because we'll have a regular cadence for them, they'll be predictable for our customer base. The change sets will be smaller. So as I said, they're only going to be bug fixes and minor enhancements. So they should be a little more consumable that way because the change set is so minor. And the other advantage, of course, is the fixes are always going to appear in that following release, which in fact makes that jump to Gateway Next a little bit smaller. If you're on 9.3 and you've taken CR1, CR2, CRN, when you finally get to Gateway Next, you've already added all of those bugs and enhancements to your gateway. All you're doing at that point is upgrading for larger fixes and architectural changes that we might have added. So we're hoping that smaller change set, or that more consumable change set, will encourage our customer base to be able to upgrade the gateway faster. And we've actually started this process with 9.2. So for those of you that are running 9.2 now, a lot of the performance fixes that I mentioned earlier have already appeared in one of the CRs for 9.2 that we've released throughout the previous year. So this is something that we've started. We're going to continue to move down this road and move down and adopt this model for gateway releases going forward. And we want to make sure that our customer base is going to be happy taking those types of releases. And that's all I've got for today. So I just wanted to end off my conversation with a couple of quick points. We always encourage our customer base to submit ideas on communities.ca.com. The idea section specifically. So I definitely read those on a regular basis. Other product managers read those on a regular basis, and we do use those to influence the things that we add to the gateway in the time frame that we do. So please feel free to continue to submit. As well, I wanted to also plug our customer validation project. So this is actually located at validate.ca.com. This will allow users to be able to come in and really see a lot of the product alpha and product beta functionality that we've been releasing. So going forward, well, starting with 9.2 and going forward, we're trying to kind of release more snippets of functionality or forward-thinking directions for the gateway in order to start to solicit some feedback from our customer base around the direction that we're taking, or the way that we've implemented something. So if you want to be able to participate in that, please feel free to go to validate.ca.com and register yourself, and you'll then be alerted anytime we add something to the Validate page. Great, and that's all I've got today, guys. So at this point, I guess we can open it up to questions.
Okay, great. So we have quite a few in the Q&A box, and as we're going through those, just a reminder that if you have a verbal question, now's the time where you can ask that. You can click #6 on your telephone keypad to unmute yourself. In the meantime, we will go through some of the questions that have been compiled in the Q&A box. Arvind S. asks, are there any plans to introduce a GUI to the GMU?
So at this point, we've been looking at what we might do for with the GMU. I mean, right now we're focusing on the GMU as a command line tool, and the simple reason is because a lot of our customer base is actually moving that way. So they're looking at the GMU as more of a DevOps friendly CI/CD pipeline tool chain that they're starting to incorporate within their environments. And as we move forward with more of a container model for the gateway and start to embrace that technology, we see tools like the GMU and RESTman, those command line tools that allow users to orchestrate, with scripts, as being a lot more important. That being said, we do realize that there are some values to having a graphical representation of migration. So whether or not it would be something as simple as simply putting a GUI on top of GMU, or maybe thinking more about what we want the migration experience to be from a graphical point of view, because it might be a little bit different. We haven't really explored that yet. So it's something that we're considering. It's something that we're looking at holistically as a way forward for the gateway in general to be able to kind of behave better in some of these newer environments that our customers are experiencing.
Okay. Is there anything specific like AMI built for HVM, for GCP, and for Azure?
Is there anything specific? Sorry, what was?
Is there anything specific like AMI built for HVM, for GCP, and for Azure?
Oh, so yeah. So I quickly mentioned that the AMI is now built as an HVM image in 9.3. So we do realize that Amazon is starting to phase out the old para-virtualized or PV image type. So we've made that change to be able to accommodate the new way for Amazon. The Azure image is still released today. It's still one of the form factors that we support, and the 9.3 has got an Azure image as well. In terms of so was it gRPC
GCP.
or the GPC? Are we talking specifically about the Google? I'm trying to put it into words, but the new Google API standard. If it is, we're looking at a lot of different enhancements and tools around the way that users can use the gateway. So things like Kafka, HTTP2, GPC. We haven't really made any specific plans around them. However, we're always interested in hearing about our customers' use cases, or at least their desired use cases around those particular technologies.
Okay. Okay. Anything? Oh, wait, nope. That's whoops. That's that one. Are all the features compatible with CASSO 12.8?
Yes. So the gateway today has been certified. The 9.3 version of the gateway has been certified for 12.7. So 12.8 is not yet GA, as far as I know, although it might be changing soon. However, once 12.8 comes out, we will do a validation effort with the 9.3 gateway to ensure that 9.3 is compatible with 12.8. And we would do that mainly because we want to keep up to date with CA products in general, but we've also added specific functionality in 9.3 that we know will be supported in 12.8. So when 12.8 does come out, we will prioritize the validation of the 9.3 gateway, with that version.
Okay. Let's see, what else do we have here? Can we go directly from 9.1 to 9.3?
Yes, you can. So and in fact, that's what the accelerated upgrade process is intended to do. So the ability to go from one version straight to 9.3 using that process.
Okay. What are the licensing? Oh, sorry. Did you have?
Sorry, I was just going to say. I should also mention that particular upgrade process has actually been documented in our regular user documentation. So feel free to look in the 9.3 docs to see exactly what that process entails and some of the details.
Okay. What are the licensing options for the gateway when running in Docker?
So right now, the gateway container still uses the same, kind of licensing metric for Docker. I mean, we're really looking at the Docker container as another form factor for the gateway today. It is still a completely fully functional gateway. It still is very performant and certainly in line with the performance of, other form factors for the gateway as well. So right now in 9.3, we still have the same licensing model for that gateway. Now that being said, we are definitely looking at the container or container technologies in general as something that we really want to pursue for the gateway. So as we go forward and as we make changes to the Docker container to even behave more like a purely immutable Docker container, we want to also consider changes to the licensing model to be able to allow our customer base to use it in the way that they would want to use other Docker containers. And I'm pretty sure we're thinking about things like scaling up and scaling down and auto-scaling and things like that. So as we continue down the road of embracing this technology and moving our product towards that technology, we also want to be able to shift the licensing model in a way that makes sense around the way that our customer base would want to consume that type of form factor.
Okay. The circuit breaker assertion, does it self-reset and is it configurable?
Yes and yes. So the circuit breaker, like most things with the gateway, it's a very configurable piece of technology. So it does operate as a block, or as a logical folder, and customers can add whatever assertions they want to that folder. They can set whatever thresholds they want in terms of tripping the circuit, and can set whatever additional or whatever reset parameter they want to set as well. Additionally, we've also got a cluster property that I believe is documented that will allow a customer to open a circuit for an indefinite amount of time. So if you know that a service is not working correctly and you need to do a longer-term fix, you can just quickly go and trip that circuit using a cluster property, take as long as you need to actually fix the problem that's actually causing the circuit to trip, and then go back and reset that circuit, and the gateway will continue to use it. So very, very configurable, entirely up to the customer and whatever their particular environment requires.
Okay. How do the CRs work in a container package?
So the CR, yeah, so that's actually a very good question. So kind of getting back to the original statement around the fact that the workflow is going to be different for the container, the container form factor. In existing appliance, when we issue a CR, you would get an L7P file that you would upload to the gateway, repatch, actually patch that gateway, apply the patch, and kind of keep that same gateway running. With the container, we're actually going to be issuing new instances of the container. So if you've got a Docker Compose file that's creating that container the first time, it's always going to be trying to pull the latest container, from Docker Hub. When we create a new CR, we're creating a new latest tag inside Docker Hub and uploading a new container with that CR already on it. So in that case, it would just be a quick redeploy where you would just redeploy your container. It would look in Docker Hub, find the latest, pull down the latest, and replace your existing container.
Okay. Any enhancements targeted towards integration with the API portal?
In this release, there have not been specific enhancements targeted specifically to the portal. However, in general, we do consider integration with the portal a pretty high priority for the gateway. So while I can't talk to future releases with any great detail, I can definitely assure our customer base that we are working very hard to make that transition and that cross-product deployment and cross-product behavior a lot more seamless than it is today.
Is there any plan to enable API Gateway SaaS in Azure?
At this point, I'm not sure what the plans are. I would need to go back, but it is a question that I can take back to the SaaS product management team. I don't have an answer right now, though.
Okay. Any improvements in monitoring dashboards?
Again, in this release, we haven't made any specific improvements to monitoring and dashboards, but that is actually we are actually looking at this very moment at making some improvements to that particular system. So I would be very much interested in hearing more from whoever asked that question around what types of things they'd like to monitor and what changes they'd like to see in gateway monitoring today. If you've got my contact information here, feel free to reach out to me directly if you want. We could set up a further call around that.
Okay. Is accelerated upgrade process available for 9.1 with the corresponding MAG and OTK? And will this work if there are a lot of policies that are customized?
So to the second question, yes, it should work for customized policies because the process involves you actually moving your policies over from the existing gateway to the new gateway at a database level. So it wouldn't matter what complexity you had in your policies, that complexity would be moved over. In terms of moving to from 9.1 to 9.3, yes, that should absolutely be supported. The MAG may need to be pre-installed. I believe we've got instructions in our documentation around exactly what you do if you have other things installed, but you might have an additional step where when you set up that 9.3 gateway, you would also pre-install the MAG on that 9.3 gateway as well, then migrate everything over, and it would then work. But the documentation will have specific details around that.
Okay. Will upgrade considerations for hardware appliance vary from the software OVA/AMI versions?
So I'm not sure if I understand the question. The upgrade process for appliance form factors is generally the same. Now, of course, the accelerated upgrade process we talked about today wouldn't necessarily apply to the hardware gateway, just simply because you probably don't have another hardware gateway there that you can put 9.3 on. However, for the AMI and the virtual appliance, that would most definitely apply. But overall, in terms of the similarities and differences between the upgrade process, at least the standard process, they would be the same from form factor to form factor. The only difference at this point would now be that the container is very different.
Okay. Any times when it becomes compatible with the API SaaS portal and APIM module for monitoring purposes? I guess one
so again, I think I touched on that in one of the previous questions, but there's nothing very specific in this release that would address that. But it is definitely a high priority for us moving forward to be able to be, to have a more seamless experience for our customer base between, the gateway and the portal and other CA products that we use in that environment as well. So stay tuned.
So I know we talked about how the accelerated process works from 9.1 to 9.3, and they're just asking about the upgrade path from 8.x to 9.3. He sees that there is a faster upgrade path, but it doesn't state for which version. So is that applicable for 8.x?
Yes, it is. So that accelerated upgrade process should be applicable for any currently supported version of the gateway, which for us means 8.0 and above, up to 9.3. And in fact, the further back you go, the more of a benefit that there is for that, that process.
Okay. All right. Is 9.3 supported with Portal 4.2?
I believe it is, but I need to double check with the portal team specifically what the support matrix is for the portal.
Okay. When can all API Gateway AWS SaaS environments be upgraded to 9.3? Currently, SaaS Gateway and AWS is still on 9.2.
Right. So that again would be a question for the SaaS team. I know that they've got a plan to do so. I just don't know what the timeline is for that particular, change is yet. But I can certainly find out from the team.
Okay. Can you configure circuit breaker assertions to send an email or call a policy fragment to alert people if we aren't watching the policy manager dashboard 100% of the time?
Absolutely. Again, the circuit breaker is just policy. So it's got all of the same flexibility and configurability the policy would have. In that particular case, I would envision a policy that, for example, had a circuit trip. There would be a variable set that says this policy or this circuit tripped that would in turn trigger an email alert assertion to fire off an email to some recipient that says, hey, the circuit tripped. So yeah, this is really meant to be highly configurable and really able to fit seamlessly in with other policy that you may have within the gateway today.
Any plans to support, I think it says executing JavaScript or Node.js from within the assertions?
Funny you should ask. We've actually got a Validate project up right now for a JavaScript assertion. So we've actually been working away at building an assertion that would allow users to run JavaScript within an assertion, within a policy, to be able to do that. Not necessarily Node.js specifically, but certainly generic JavaScript to allow users to start to add their own functionality via JavaScript or otherwise orchestrate policy via JavaScript. So that's actually up on Validate right now. I'll speak quickly to the product manager that's been using or that put that up. And our intention is to, we're currently getting validation on it now. We've had a lot of validation recently. Our intention is to now look at productizing that. While I can't confirm that it'll be, in what particular release it'll be in, we are definitely targeting that productization into the gateway as a very high priority.
Okay. Can the 9.3 Docker container CI or CD process be integrated with clients' existing processes?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that question?
Sure. Can the version 9.3 Docker container CI/CD process be integrated with the client's existing CI/CD process?
So that is the intention. Because we support industry standard tools, like there's nothing proprietary with any of the Docker with any of the Docker functionality. We allow you to configure it using a standard standard Docker composed YAML format. We integrate very well with other things within Docker Engine or OpenShift if that's what you happen to be using. If you've already got tools that are integrating with those environments or allowing you to have a pipeline that actually populates things to those environments, at some level the gateway just becomes yet another container that you are actually deploying with the same process. So our intention is definitely to have that particular form factor fit very seamlessly into whatever tools chain or whatever tool set you happen to be using internally today for your own processes.
Okay. Going forward, can Gateway act as only resource server, token issuing server on cloud, and authentication server independently on cloud instances?
So generally, the gateway could act as a token service now. We certainly have got a variety of token service-like functionality within the gateway. You could definitely deploy a gateway with that model, and we do have other customers, for example, that do deploy. One instance of the gateway might be deployed as just a token service to be able to serve up tokens and validate tokens, while other gateways in their environment might be performing more of the regular runtime processing of traffic that it would normally do. It's really configurable, and it's really up to what it is that you want to do with that particular gateway. You need to understand more of the use case and what it was you were trying to do. So again, if you want to reach out to me directly to talk about it more, I'm more than happy to do so.
Okay. Would the JavaScript assertion that you talked about allow you to do something like math in a simple way rather than doing XLS or XSL?
Yeah. So a lot of the primary use cases that have driven that particular assertion are specifically around transformation. So, I mean, while the XSLT assertion will definitely transform XML well, we don't really have a good story today in the gateway for transforming JSON. So a lot of those a lot of the use cases and a lot of the the driver for that particular assertion was around transformation or, in general, any kind of message manipulation. So yeah, that would definitely be a use case that could be supported for that particular assertion.
Okay. Okay. So I think that's all we have in the Q&A box. At this point, does anyone have any verbal questions they'd like to ask? Okay. So if there are no more questions, I'm going to go ahead and put out a short poll. If you guys could let us know what you thought of the topic today. We like to collect your feedback when planning out future sessions, so it's helpful for us to know what you guys thought. Other than that, I will be posting the Q&A transcript, the slides from today's session, and the recording to the community later today. I'll also send out a follow-up email to everyone that joined with a link to those. So keep an eye out for that. Otherwise, thank you so much, Erin, for a great presentation today. I will be posting all of that to the community, so we will get follow-up on anything that wasn't answered, although I think we did get to everything, but I will double-check that before we post. So once again, thank you, Erin, so much. Thank you, everyone, so much for joining, and we'll see you guys out in the communities. I hope everyone has a great day.
Great. Thank you all very much.